Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Alfaisal Medhab Podcasts. This is Elsabil Haq, a third year medical student from Alfaisal University, and I'll be hosting a very special session today on a delicate balance between religion and profession, a how-to for Ramadan as a medical professional. This is something most of us will eventually experience, and when it does hit us, it might almost feel like it was all a bit too sudden. Joining us today is a very special guest. She is one of our Al Faisal alumni, a graduate from the fifth batch of the College of Medicine. It is truly my pleasure to be introducing Dr. Meena, a hematology and oncology fellow at Mayo Clinic who has had plenty of experience as a medical professional and multiple experiences with balancing the upcoming holy month of Ramadan and her work. Hello and welcome, Dr. Meena. We're so happy to have you at the MedHub podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be back.
We're very excited to have you here as well. So let's kickstart our podcast with the first question. So we know that your day must be pretty hectic, I can only imagine. Could you walk us through what an average day looks like in your life outside of Ramadan in terms of how demanding your specialty is and so on?
Sure. Yeah. So, thank you for introducing me. So right now, as a Hem-Onc fellow, life is slightly more different compared to internal medicine residency, which is obviously the big chunk of training initially when you start here. But even in fellowship, we kind of alternate between months. So each month looks different. So if you're on an outpatient rotation, you have your weekends, you work Monday through Friday. Usually your patients are at 8 a.m. through 5 p.m. So you're waking up around like 6:37, going to morning conference, getting ready to see patients throughout, finishing notes, and coming home by 5:36 by the time you wrap things up. Versus if I'm on an inpatient rotation, it's usually 6 days a week, usually Monday through Saturday, which I am on right now during Ramadan. So here what happens is rounds usually start around 8:30 to 9, but you want to obviously pre-round, read about your patient, so you kind of have an earlier start. I'm usually at work by 7 or like 6:45, kind of reading through the patient charts, seeing if there's anything acute that needs to be done. Then you round. We'll always usually have morning and noon conferences, even in fellowship. So you do those, grab some quick lunch, wrap up things after rounds, see what needs to be done in terms of orders, discharge paperwork, etc. As a fellow, I have a more supervisory role, so there will be some months where I do write notes on inpatient rotation, but usually I either have physician assistants or residents kind of doing that part. But as a fellow, you're more of a supervisory role. But I would exchange that in a residence place. You would be kind of spending your afternoon writing notes, finishing up some tidbits, and then you sign out. And usually I'm home between 5:30 to 6. Some days are longer than others. And then I come home, grab dinner with my husband, and then get ready for the next day. And it's like a rinse and repeat until that one day off.
That must be a lot. I get tired just thinking about it. So, mashallah, you're great. You must be great at managing both work and life as well. So, people often plan their days in Ramadan to last with as much energy as possible till iftar. Mm-hmm. So, one way people do this is by napping during fasting. So, does fellowship offer you the same degree of freedom in terms of your sleep schedule, or are there workarounds you kind of have to formulate in order to reach your daily quota of sleep?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I love afternoon naps, but unfortunately I don't have the luxury of taking those as often as I would want to. As I just described my day throughout, there really doesn't leave much room for a nap because I'm coming home around like 5:36 and iftar is at 7. So you come home, you want to prepare for iftar too, or like get your prayers or read the Quran. There's just so much you want to do. So I will say, personally speaking, there's like no room for a nap prior to iftar. But if someone is very efficient with their naps, I can see like right after iftar, before Taraweeh, if you want to take a 30-minute nap. I personally don't because, after Taraweeh is bedtime anyway, so I don't want to like take a nap and like not get good sleep at night. So to answer shortly, I don't think naps is the way I go around getting more energy. For me personally, the life hack that I've learned over the last few years is like, utilizing however much caffeine you need during suhoor. And so every time we have our meal in suhoor, we buy cold brew coffee, so I can like chug down some coffee like last minute before Fajr, and I just like drink a whole cup and pray Fajr, and then take a quick nap right before I have to wake up to go to work, and that really does last me the whole day.
Wow, that's a great life hack. I don't know about the health aspect of it, but it sounds very efficient.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next question. So, how would you say fasting has affected your energy levels over the course of your work days during Ramadan?
Yeah, I think everyone is really different. I personally always just like loved fasting, and it didn't affect me physically as much because there are days I will just go without like eating. I normally don't eat breakfast anyway. So I think there's a part of like what your baseline and normal schedule is, that is how much fasting might affect your day to day. I think if you can make the effort to wake up for suhoor, like have a good meal that like lasts you, obviously a healthy meal, either like something protein packed like eggs, or even like a high fiber diet like oatmeal. Those typically tend to kind of give you like a sustaining energy rather than just like pure carbs like bread or rice, because I think we like burn out our carbs really quickly. So I think it really does depend on the meal, the timing of it, and obviously how strenuous your work is. I think in medical profession, like our brains are always running on all four
Mhm.
cylinders, but physically, you're just working at a desk, you're rounding, but it's just like slow paced walking. It's not like you're running or doing much physically. So I think the thirst can get to me sometimes, but overall, work just keeps you so busy that I don't even realize that I haven't eaten anything all day until like it's the evening. And that's like, it's always like right before iftar when you're starting to get tired, but subhanAllah, that's when you're
Mhm.
ready for your meal.
Yeah, so speaking of thirst, how do you maintain hydration levels? Because it must be a long day of, even though if it's not like physically taxing, it's still a lot of brain work and you might get thirsty. So how do you maintain hydration levels?
Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect way to do that either, right? I've read a lot how like at suhoor time to eat like a balanced drink like with electrolytes tends to help sustain hydration rather than just drinking pure water, where if you just drink a ton of water, you just flush it out and then you're not really hydrated. So but I think the factor of thirst is still going to be there, and I think that is the essence of Ramadan, to kind of, if it was all just easy, then you don't really feel or the whole essence of Ramadan. So I think thirst is just a part of it. It makes you realize, oh yes, I am fasting, and I'm very, very grateful that I have food and water when I go home. So um, just whenever you do break your fast, to keep a reminder or like keep a jug of water to like keep hydrated for the hours that you can eat and drink. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer, honestly. Like we get so caught up in the thirst and like, oh, I have to drink water. We don't understand the rewards. We forget to realize the rewards of it. So, next question is the choices available for one to pursue the residency are abundant. So, how do a few of your colleagues from other specialties deal with their fasts?
I personally obviously have friends within internal medicine primarily, so
Hmm.
their lives look very similar to mine. And I will say, even in my residency and fellowship, I never had like a Muslim colleague who was fasting with me throughout, like within my specialty. Um, I think most, I think the most challenging I can imagine would be a surgical residency where your hours are so undetermined when you start, when you finish, and that is probably one of the um residency where it's also physically taxing. You're just like not at a desk all day. It's you have to have so much stamina. But I honestly don't have much experience of my colleagues going through with it from different subspecialties to even share an anecdote. But I want to say that it must be more tough and more rewarding.
Yeah, great. Okay, so often as Muslims, as you mentioned, you don't really have any Muslim colleagues with you who fast with you. We tend to hunt down in unfamiliar environments. Tend to hunt down the best time and place to perform our prayers. So, how do you maintain consistency in your prayers and other religious practices while going through your schedule through Ramadan, especially let's say Tarawih prayers?
Yeah, I think I had to figure out a whole lot of that as I was going through residency because, it's not easy. No one teaches you that. And it's very like dependent on your personality of how outspoken you want to be or how you kind of manage your day. So I definitely struggled with that. I think how I'll just answer this question is with some words of advice. I think just sharing with your team that you're working on with that month, or because you always work in teams if you're in residency, or just like a certain set of colleagues that you'll work with daily. If you're obviously fasting and stuff, to kind of share with your senior or with your colleague, like, hey, Ramadan is starting, I'll be fasting this month. This is kind of how it looks. I might have to break away around noon to just do some quick prayers or like whatever times, Zuhur and Asr, because usually those are the two prayers that get caught up during work hours. I um, typically try to put a reminder or like, use one of those apps that kind of remind you, how many minutes you have to Asr. It's sometimes easy to kind of break away towards the end of Zuhur and Asr is about to begin. That's where I can just like kind of leave, pray Zuhur, wait for Asr, and then pray Asr. And then I try to do two at once before I go back to work. If you have at least half an hour that you can dedicate to do both rather than like taking breaks two times, which can be a bit more time consuming. But obviously it kind of depends on your work. I think the third piece of advice is like in my residency, there was only a small chapel in our hospital where I would go to pray, but it wasn't really convenient at all given times. So I actually kept our workroom had like a small closet-like space. I kept a prayer rug where I would just because you also want convenience. You don't have time to like go for 5-10 minute walks to a particular part of your hospital. So I would just like pray in the workroom sometimes if it's like quiet and I know like it's a bit like secluded from the main workroom space. Or my easiest hack was always just going to the on-call rooms because those are usually close to where we are located. So I would just go to an on-call room, quickly pray. Having a prayer rug is always hard. So if you know you're using a room very often, I would leave one of my prayer rugs there, or I would just, use a towel or a paper towel or even my scarf to just pray.
Wow, that those are really amazing life hacks that we might need in the future if we plan to do residency outside Saudi Arabia. Because one of the many beauties of Saudi Arabia is the atmosphere really pushes us to be steadfast on our iman and our ibadah. Um, Whether it be neighbors or work colleagues, they're always they always come together and we pray together in Ramadan, and it's all a shared experience. So, do you have a similar friendly neighborhood or a Muslim community that helps you stay motivated throughout the month?
Yeah, honestly, that is the beauty of growing up in Saudi Arabia. And, we only realize what we have once you're not in it anymore. So I think nothing can ever replicate the Ramadan festivities that we had growing up. And that is just such a unique, thankfully, that is a part of my childhood that I'll hold very dearly. Again, city to city in the United States, it's so variable. There are some states where if you live there, you'll be like, oh, I never left the Middle East, particularly like places like Michigan, Chicago, New York City. But if you happen to be in some states where the Muslim population is not as robust, which for me was Arizona, I think that's where you have to kind of put an effort and seek out your community. Phoenix was a very large city with few scattered mosques around, and in residency you're just already so tired. But it was those moments where you're just so lonely. You want to seek out the community. So I used to go to two particular mosques, ended up making friends, and every mosque here, subhanAllah, they understand that the community needs us to gather, and hence they will have iftars very often. Actually, regardless of how big or small of a city you are, most mosques try to make an effort to gather the community for iftar. And I think it was through those through those events where I found a sense of festivity, made a lot of good friends, which I'm very close to even through today, even though I like moved from Arizona now. But that was definitely my highlight. And then we used to try to invite each other over to just have like people to break our fast with. And now that I've moved to Rochester, Minnesota, which is a much smaller city, we have like 2 mosques here. And to my surprise, there is still like a huge Muslim community that I didn't get to meet up until like almost just yesterday, where we had like an iftar gathering. There were like hundreds of people, like subhanAllah. I think that's where like we all are kind of in the same struggle boat, and we all realize the power of being united. And just always seek out your closest mosque is my biggest advice. And if you don't have a mosque, like most universities will have a Muslim Student Association, which is MSA in here. And every Ramadan that I've spent here, which I've done it as a student, as a resident, now as a fellow, the mosques and the communities have really helped me through the whole month.
Wow, that's amazing, honestly. Community is so powerful, and we don't realize it once before we kind of get out of the community, that how important it is. Next question would be, what strategies have you incorporated in order to maintain a positive mindset, to maximize your time to ibadah during this month of Ramadan, and maintain, let's say, a sense of gratitude, especially when facing challenges during this month?
Yeah, I think that's a very, personable question. It differs from person to person. I think we all, by the time Ramadan comes, we all kind of need Ramadan to be here. We are all kind of going through something. Our iman is probably not at the peak that we would want it to. So it's almost like setting New Year's resolutions and, giving yourself a break and be like, hey, Allah, like this is the month of forgiveness. So I think just kind of starting with being humble and setting like small goals. The number of times I'm like, oh, I want to finish the Quran, I want to read it in English, I want to do it 2-3 times. Like, we can start with very lofty aspirational goals, but I've realized with such a busy schedule, like God isn't asking me to do so much. Allah is just asking me to be consistent. And I think realizing even just doing small amounts every day is what's important. And I've kind of personally struggled with that for a while, to be like, oh, I can't do as much as I used to before. I think, again, it differs month to month. If I have time on a more chill clinic time rotation, reading a couple pages of Quran with every prayer is somewhat reasonable. But like, for example, this month, I'm just somehow trying to pray and go back to work because I just know I need to be there. And even if you tell your colleagues, they don't fully understand, like, there's just so much we want to do in Ramadan. They just understand, okay, it's like a 5-minute prayer, but they don't realize that reading the Quran is such an important part of this month, or like going to Taraweeh is such an important part of this month. So I usually tend to come home and spend some time, I think, pre-iftar. And I think that's where it helps, like meal prepping for a week, because there's only like few hours of your day that you can contribute, and you really need to prioritize, like, where will I spend these hours? Will I spend it for my ibadah? Will I spend it preparing my food? Will I spend it napping? Or so, it really pushes you to be efficient with your time and pushes you to choose your priorities correctly. So I think the only way I can balance it is like we don't make a big deal about our iftar. It's like literally eating either a Costco salad, or like we just warm up some frozen meals. And I'm okay with that, even though I know back home, if it was with my parents and my big families, like iftar is such a big deal. We're preparing so much. That takes hours of my day, which I do not have the time for. So the meals are very subdued. It's like just one meal and some dates. So when I do have a few hours at home, I can spend that like reading the Quran or watching like an Islamic video. And then and I think minimizing the food also helps me with not going into a big food coma, so I can actually go to Taraweeh. And I think that's just like setting your priorities straight, and for whatever hour you have to ask yourself, like, how do I want to divvy this up? What's important and what can I forego?
Mashallah, that's very inspiring. I'm sure a lot of our viewers could take away something valuable from your advice. It really is one of the most important months of the year, and keeping a positive mindset and a mindset that, yes, I have to maximize my ibadah, it really can take us a long way, inshallah, both in this life and in the hereafter.
Inshallah, inshallah.
So speaking of meals, could you share with us any culinary life hacks for fresh juniors who just entered residency in a new country? And also, if you could
Oh,
share your favorite Ramadan special dish, that would be great as well.
that is a great question, and I wish I could be more helpful with that. I am not a foodie, nor do I really cook, unfortunately. I am just someone who kind of survived. It's been so many years, and I think I'm still like surviving on a like day-to-day basis on like not knowing what exactly to eat next. But so I don't think I have a perfect recipe or anything to share because I just go with the flow with whatever is in our fridge. Uh, I think the biggest like hack wise is buying like it's not a healthy hack, so I'm kind of ashamed to share it, but like just like I'm a frozen meal girl, and I have done it as a student for many years, or like kind of if you have a Costco's a like a membership kind of situation in the US if you haven't been here. But they have few healthy like pre-cooked meals. For example, they will have pre-seasoned salmon or pre-seasoned like veggies or potatoes like that. It's already kind of somewhat healthy and like prepped. You just have to either bake it or air fry it. So we kind of go for those. There are a lot of salad kits that I use, and those you can find in Target, Walmart, Costco, just if you have a family that just has bigger portions. So we usually just like have a salad and choose to have a protein with it, whether it's like if we have some halal chicken, I just kind of season it and then bake it. Um, or like as I was just mentioning, the salmon parts of things. Um, I'm Bangladeshi, so our cuisine is very different. We eat a lot of rice and curries, which unfortunately or fortunately, I don't have the luxury of eating a whole lot unless like I'm visiting my parents or my parents are visiting me, and then I'm just very lucky to have someone help me with some cooked meals. So, um, I think the cuisines are very different for me to offer any particular iftar dish. But I would say for us personally, it's going to be like chickpeas that we kind of just saute with onions and some tomatoes, and that's a quick healthy meal that I still try to make sometimes.
Yep, I can vouch for that. Yeah, it is very tasty. Okay, those are pretty practical life hacks, I would say, for anyone moving to residency in the US. How do you adjust your exercise routine during Ramadan to stay active while fasting?
Yeah, I think just maintaining an exercise routine, even without Ramadan, is such a challenge with residency and fellowship because you just don't have much left in you after a long day. Some people are much better at it than others because exercise means different to different people. For some people, it is like a staple of their daily life. And I think if you already have such a strong habit of exercising, it's easier to carry it on. But if you're already someone who doesn't work out multiple times a week, like you will see that in Ramadan. Again, you only have a certain hours. You'll have to pick and choose what am I going to keep and what will be sacrificed this month. So I think the only way I'm like not the most avid workout person. I work out maybe a couple times a week pre-Ramadan. But during Ramadan, the only thing, if we're able to maintain it, if I come home a bit early, is like going on a walk, because we have a very nice lake around us. And if the weather is nice, going on for walks. And, during that time, you can like listen to an Islamic video or like in your AirPods, or like you can even walk and read the Quran on your iPad or your phone. So I think like trying to do two things at once, if time and environment allows, is always better hack, or at least not a hack, just like kind of time efficiency. So for me right now is just walks before iftar would be, I don't think if it's even a workout, it's just like some physical activity.
True. And it helps in mindfulness as well, which brings me to my next question. What role does mindfulness and self-reflection play in maintaining a balance between your work and life during Ramadan?
Oh, I think that's everything, right? If you don't self-reflect, if you don't realize why you're doing what you're doing, like why are you observing Ramadan even though it is so hard? Then none of it, like you can't, I don't think it's sustainable. And I think as Muslims, again, it kind of differs person to person. I think these answers cannot be generalized, because we are all in a different journey with our iman. But I think obviously with everything happening in Gaza this year, like nothing in this world really matters. You know there is an akhirah, and you know that like there's just so much noise in this dunya, and Ramadan is like that one month that reminds you like, hey, like we need to put our accounts in ready for akhir, because we all can just pass away. Maybe tomorrow if I don't go into work, they will go on, like they will be upset that I'm not there, but they will go on and they'll probably not remember me in like 1 to 2 weeks. I might not even last in their memory for even a month. So to kind of realize what is truly important in this dunya and akhirah, which is going to be your family, to make time for your family who will be most impacted if you're not here. And obviously like thinking what happens once we leave, thinking of our grave. And because if you don't have those affairs right, then none of this really matters. So I think for each of us it's different, and we have those different realizations. And like, do I realize this every morning when I wake up? Obviously not. But every now and then when I'm like, oh, I haven't prayed, or like, there's this guilt that works and you want to reset your priorities. I think that always goes back. What is important to you?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That is such an important reality check.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to another important aspect of Ramadan, how do you incorporate acts of kindness and charity into your daily routine, and let's say avoid conflicts or disagreements during Ramadan without overwhelming yourself, knowing how busy your schedule is?
Yeah, I think avoiding conflicts will just come with being patient, which Ramadan is about, exercising your patience and endurance, and walking away from things that are not worth your time and doesn't add value to this dunya or akhirah. So that's an easy one. Walk away when something's not worth your time. In terms of acts of kindness, again, depends on what community you're in. If you see there's if you find any Muslims around you who, like, for example, when I had moved, I was in Arizona for a couple of years already, and then I saw people trickle in from who are Muslim, and I'm like, okay, you're new to the city. I think those are the simplest act of kindness. Like if you're gonna go to the masjid, just make sure like, hey, is there someone else you can take with you? Because that's like a double ajr right there, and it's like just making sure that you are there for your community first and foremost. Or like people you just know, that you're like, hey, do you have anyone to do iftar with? If you don't, like make sure like you can come over whenever, or I can come over. To always just be welcoming and approachable. And because we're all kind of struggling in some form or shape, especially in the United States, when you move in, like everyone goes through that loneliness journey, and once you've experienced it, you will know exactly like that one person who was there for you, and they will always like stick out to you. So you always trying to like pay it forward in a way. So I think those are some acts of kindness, which is simple, right? You eat your meal anyway, you might as well just invite someone over. I think in terms of like donation stuff, again, kind of matters what is important to you, where is it important to you? Do you know like a struggling family member or a friend who could really help some with financial support? You might not have a lot to give, but even if it's a bit, maybe this is definitely the month that you kind of think of them or seek out and see if you could help in any way. And I think just being on Instagram or like social media in general, following the right people. Obviously, I like follow the Yaqeen Institute closely, or like Yasmin Mujahid, or like a lot of these Islamic scholars that are like well known in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of good resources for raising funds, which are more like authentic, or like exactly where the money is going if there's a specific cause. I think social media and just the internet has made it so much easier to like put in donations. I also use automated donations. If you're like, hey, I'm going to forget to make donations this month, even if it's like $10, right? It doesn't have to be something lofty. If it's just like recurring, I think the main thing is staying consistent, because Allah just wants us to be consistent, even if it's a small amount.
That's a beautiful answer. I loved when you said to move away from something that's not worth your time. That
Yeah,
really stuck to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people, other people as well.
100%.
Yeah. The last 10 nights, known as the nights of Laylatul Qadr, are the ones where Muslims try to kind of ramp up the amount of time they spend with Allah due to its importance, definitely. How do you manage your time during the last 10 days of Ramadan with your busy schedule?
Oh, that is a tough question because again, you just want to do so much, and what I was mentioning, how nothing else matters. Those 10 nights, you literally feel like nothing else matters. I just want to be either at the masjid, I want to go to qiyam, I want to do so much. If it was a perfect world, and if we had a lot of autonomy and a lot of PTO, which is paid time off, I would love to take just 10 days off during those last 10 nights. And I think if we someday have the luxury of doing so, that would definitely be a way to spend time with family and really honing in the importance of the last 10 nights. At this moment in life, I do not have the luxury of doing that just as of yet. And I have spent those last 10 nights in variable stages. There was a month where I was on nights. There was a month where I was on a lighter rotation. There was a month I was on like really tough wards. So every year looks different, and alhamdulillah, like I'm just so grateful that Allah has allowed me to experience another Ramadan, because you just always like, what if I don't get to see it again? If you can't physically, or like if you can't allow the time for it just because work and is so consuming, just know that your niyyah is what Allah like looks at. It's not that you're physically at the masjid or not. If you are, doing your dhikr, thinking about Allah, and like, asking for forgiveness, doing however much your time allows, I think that's most important. But if you do have the time, if like, you obviously want to ramp up however much you can. So like minimizing even more things, like your meals get smaller, you don't nap, you don't work out. Those last 10 nights, every minute that you have left, you just want to spend it with ibadah, however, whatever your form of ibadah might be. Masjids, obviously, like in Saudi, we used to go for qiyam. And here as well, there are a lot of mosques that do qiyam. So if you have the luxury of, if you're on a clinic rotation, you have to wake up at 7 a.m. But if you can just like double up on your caffeine, or like take small, like, just truncate your sleeping schedule, like those things are possible, but it's definitely difficult. But again, it will all kind of matter on how much you want to do. But at the end of the day, having the right niyyah, I think, is most important. And I've kind of struggled with that personally, like just being upset that, oh my God, I can't do enough. But, you remind yourself that you can only do so much. And yeah, Allah will always reward your niyyah above everything else.
Yeah, mashallah. Inshallah, Allah will pour more barakah into your whatever ibadah you can do, you can fit into your busy schedule. And that brings us to the end of the podcast. Again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to share your advice here with us. Do you have any last words before we end the podcast?
No, thank you so much for having me. In terms of last pieces of advice, I would just summarize everything I kind of mentioned throughout this podcast in a scattered way. First, if and when you do move to the United States, to reach out to your community around you, people who have been there in the past. You will somehow, some way, always find someone Muslim, obviously. Reach out to Muslim student associations or the mosques around you, find the halal stores. That should be your research before you even move to that place. Second of all, make your intentions like known to your colleagues when you're fasting, to be transparent to some degree so that they know what to expect. In the month of Ramadan, a lot of people don't even know what Ramadan is. So that is a beautiful time to educate them. It's also a form of da'wah at some point. So utilize that time to share your religion whenever you can. Have the right niyyah, and try to stay consistent, even if it's small acts of worship and kindness. That's all.
Thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for listening or watching the podcast from wherever you are. And may Allah help us all have a blessed Ramadan, inshallah. And yeah, that's it for today.
Thank you so much. I wish you guys best of luck. Reach out with any questions at any time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.